AEW Unrestricted is on, and I'm Will Washington, and that is Aubrey Edwards. Aubrey, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited about today. I'm like all smiles. It's a Thursday. We've recently had a pay-per-view. Life is good. Life is good at AEW, man.
It is, and honestly, it's Thursday right now. Some of you might be checking this out on a Monday, and this coming Wednesday, we're headed to Denver, and I couldn't be more excited about that because the times we don't have to travel are always the best. But folks, don't forget this. Being AEW Unrestricted means that we are sponsored in part by Upper Deck. Collect your favorite wrestlers in 2025 Upper Deck AEW and start your trading card collection today. Unwrap autograph memorabilia and premium tech inserts. Visit upperdeck.com to learn more. Look, I've got so many of these. I love these packs. I let my kids love them. They always want to go through, and then when they find somebody that I'm friends with, they're like, "Oh my God, can you send this to them?" And then it's always great. And we've got so many here. I just pulled. There's the Hounds of Hell there. There's
there's a lot of great cards.
Remember Stokely and Kris Statlander? They're those two no longer together. But that
Statlander we have now. It's very reminiscent of old Statlander.
Yeah. No, honestly, seeing the Kris of today, I take it a million times over, especially knowing who FTR has become now.
Yeah. But it's interesting to see the growth of all of these people who have joined AEW, right? We've seen Kris Statlander, who has been a part of AEW from near the beginning. We have FTR, who joined during the pandemic. There's so many amazing moments within the first 5 years of AEW that still, we think about to this day.
Yeah, and I think that is what gets me so excited about what we're talking about today, because this was a project that everybody involved in today's podcast got to work on, and we've had to stay quiet about it for so long. Aubrey, who do we got on today's show?
We are joined today, and I'm very, very excited to talk about this. I'm going to read this because the intro is very, very impressive. We are joined by Keith Greenberg, who is a television producer currently with Dateline NBC and formerly with the Forensic Files, America's Most Wanted. He's also an author, known for an extensive work in professional wrestling and true crime. He's written over 30 nonfiction books. He's written articles for various publications, including WWE Magazine, Playboy, Men's Journal, Huffington Post, Village Voice, so much more. He's an incredible person to have on this podcast. And we are here today to talk about this book is All Elite, the inside story of All Elite Wrestling, which is now available for pre-order and available this year in November. So welcome, Keith. We're very happy you could make it.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm glad, at least from my perspective, that the long writing process is over.
Right? That it's all of this has paid off.
I'm glad we could all finally talk about it, because the cool thing was all three of us got to really work on this book. Of course, not as much as Mr. Keith Elliot Greenberg, but nonetheless, we all got to work on this book and then not talk about it publicly. And
it was so agonizing, right? And you guys were doing interviews, and I did some of the interviews, so we were collaborating, but I couldn't tell anyone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We couldn't even tell. The beauty of it was we couldn't even tell the people we were interviewing what this was actually for. That's how much this project had been kept under wraps over the last 2 years. And to now know that it is here, it's announced, people are excited about it, and there's so much more that people are going to get to hear from this. I think it's really cool, and I think it's great that it's all finally out there.
Yeah, it's a relief in a way, because once I watched Dynamite and they showed the QR code to order it, I'm like, this is real. This is happening. We can't go back now.
Do you get excited still every single time that you get toward publication date and something that you've been working on for a very long time? You still feel that magic after all these years?
Yes, especially something like this, because, again, you guys are deep inside this story because you lived it from the beginning. But, this is a crucial piece of wrestling history. And, I'm well aware of the fact that 100 years from now, people will still be looking back on those first 5 years of AEW and looking at everything that's transpired since in the context of that. And really, it's thrilling to have my name on something like that.
So I think that begs the question, how did you get involved into this project?
I don't know. No, I know. I know that I received a call at one point from Adam Hopkins, the public relations person, who I've known for a while from the time we were both contributors to WWE. And he said, I put your name out there. And then I spoke to Alex Davis, who was the editor at Random House. And he told me he had just become a fan during the COVID era. And
That's right. I remember that conversation.
And so he was, he was an outsider. So the first wrestling he ever watched was AEW because it was on every Wednesday night and it was brand new. So he's learning how to be a wrestling fan as the world is learning about AEW and how to follow AEW. So then when he can finally walk into a bookstore, as COVID restrictions are lifting, and buy a wrestling book, the first book he buys is Follow the Buzzards, Pro Wrestling in the Age of COVID-19, which I happened to write. So I was his first choice because he didn't know any other wrestling authors.
But you gotta love how that works out, right? That like the fact that all kind of serendipitously came together and allowed for this project to come together the way it did. And for somebody who was, and I remember having those conversations with him because it was like to think about somebody's first exposure to professional wrestling in like total. Like we're not just talking about, this is like, a lot of people said I got back into it during the pandemic. I heard that a lot. I heard a lot of people who said that, the shows really helped them through the hard times. But to know that, like, to discover wrestling without fans, I think is a very fascinating way to discover professional wrestling because of the fact
to discover AEW.
Yeah.
And AEW's unique style of wrestling. Mm-hmm. Because, I'm so used to when I'm telling people about AEW, kind of, evangelizing to them. It's like, okay, we're all wrestling fans. We all like different types of wrestling, but this AEW is worth checking out. He's already indoctrinated.
Yeah.
He's already he's already an usher in the congregation.
Yeah, it's great too because one of the things I love about those pandemic shows and just going back and thinking about it is the fact that it was such a level playing field, right? It's like, hey, nobody's got fans right now, so as far as we're concerned, you're just getting what the show has to offer, and then to get an understanding of it, to become a fan of it, and to use that to kind of bring it into your work and then to bring you in again. It's just you couldn't ask for a better combination of circumstances.
Right, and think about that. If you became a fan, never were a fan before in the COVID era, and the first wrestling you watch is AEW, you get Stadium Stampede, Mimosa Mayhem. You get Kenny. You get Don Callis turning on helping Kenny Omega win the title. That's pretty exciting stuff.
It's absolutely wild. And so I'm trying to put together the timeline a little bit. Like Adam Hopkins reaches out to you, says he puts your name in. You're sort of brought in by Random House. So when you came in,
brought in by both. I guess there was a consensus somewhere. I guess, I've been writing. I think I wrote my first article about professional wrestling in 1981. And one thing I've taken great pride in doing is not really burning bridges with anybody. Like, when you see my name, associated in wrestling interviews, I'm never bashing a company. I'm never saying somebody doesn't know how to work. And my attitude is I've never run a business and I've never taken a bump. So who am I to judge anybody else for their faults there? I'm a fan. I'm an enthusiast. I love the business and I love how the business progresses. And so in all that time, when I guess people at AEW were asking around about me, no one said, you don't want to work with that guy. He's trouble. And so I'm lucky.
God, I love that. And you got to love the fact that it came with so many cosigns, right? The fact that both Random House and internally at AEW, they both kind of came together. It's like a Venn diagram where they were like, you know what? Keith Elliot Greenberg. And it's like, here we are. And, the early stages of the book really involved a lot of the interview process. And that's really, until you can get kind of that information. Is that kind of how your process typically goes? How do you usually go about getting things started?
It is, but what makes this book unique is that the people, the AEW talent, were first being interviewed by folks like you and Aubrey. So there was already a level of trust. You guys were all already in the trenches with them. And that's very different than someone coming in from the outside and trying to create a trust. That trust was already established. Where the book is about more than the COVID era, but it's the first 5 years of AEW. But when you think about that, you and Aubrey were there when the rest of the world was shut down. I remember Aubrey talking about flying from Washington State and not knowing if the airports would be open because everything was shut down in California. And she makes it down to TV. And, you were in Norcross, right? Where Tony was like writing out several weeks of television by hand and making notes and crossing things out. And then when I eventually interviewed Tony about it, he shows me photos of those, of that chicken scratch that he was writing. Yep. So, you're now approaching people and interviewing them, and they've been through all of that with you. You were in the ring that night. You were working just like they were. So automatically, they're just opening up to you. And same with you, Will.
One of the things that I thought was really great about getting to do those interviews was like, it was people that I kind of already had a bit of a rapport with, and kind of getting them to open up and then start to tell stories that had never been told before, to kind of get, even a little bit, getting to talk, obviously I have a great relationship with Hangman, and then getting to interview him for this, and him dropping a nugget that I'm like, and he even said it right before. He's like, what? I don't think I've ever said this before, but this ended up happening. And then it's like, talking with Shida, and she had never really done anything like this for getting to do or getting to talk about her career for a book. And then for her to kind of open up, and it's like, oh, this is how this came together, and getting to do that. And it's like, these stories felt so personal. They felt so strong, and they felt so real. And I think that getting to, I had never gotten an interview for a book. And I think that you giving me that opportunity to do so was eye-opening, and especially getting to do so early on in my AEW career, because a lot of this stuff took place 2 years ago.
Right. Yeah. It's hard to imagine that was so long ago, but because the process, it's all kind of a blur. But I remember, having conversations with you, calling you on the phone, you saying like, well, I'm in the car now, I have about 10 minutes. Let's like brainstorm a little bit.
Yeah.
And then here it is. And now I remember reading the transcripts of your interviews, Will, and thinking, wow, first of all, you have like a photographic memory of things that occurred in AEW. But besides that, you would listen, and then you would create a parallel or an insight, and the person would speak even more. Now it's 2 years later, and here you are, co-host of Unrestricted, and it makes perfect sense.
We've got to take a quick break here at AEW Unrestricted. We're having a great conversation with Keith Greenberg here about this book is All Elite, the inside story of All Elite Wrestling, available for pre-order now at all of your favorite bookstores. Stay tuned. Unrestricted. AEW Unrestricted, Aubrey and Will. We are talking to Keith Greenberg, the author of This Book is All Elite, the inside story of All Elite Wrestling, available now for pre-order. And Will and I were both very involved on this project. And it's funny because Will had many, many conversations with Keith, but I think today is actually the first time I'm getting to meet Keith.
We've spoken. And
very briefly.
Yes, very briefly several times. I remember one time Adam Hopkins introducing us. I remember being in London for the first All In, and you came, because I also write for Inside the Ropes magazine.
Right.
UK, and I remember you popped into the room for a little while. And I remember there was another time where I guess by then I could talk to some people at AEW that the book was coming out.
That we knew it was happening, so it was
We
okay.
knew it. So I came up to you and started to like tell you how valuable I thought, your assistance was. I think you were getting ready for a match. And you were like,
probably,
get out of here.
Which is why I don't remember this conversation at all, because I'm just like, dude, I got to go out there. I got to referee. Some people are going to bleed. It's always really funny. And one of my favorite things about this book is because so few people knew about it as we were in the development of it. And this is an apology to all my coworkers that I interviewed, but I had to lie to people and I couldn't tell them like what this was for. So since Random House was involved and all of the spreadsheets said RH, it was like, yeah, I need to talk to you for the recorded history project. We're trying to get all of these snippets that we might use for in the future. So who knows? So one of my favorite interviews I did was with Kris Statlander, who I remember like her first day at the company. So to be able to talk about like her perspective of her first day at the company and then all of the shared moments we had throughout everything. And I remember distinctly, like, because we're doing it like in the arena before the show. And at one point they start doing a sound test and we have to like physically leave. And we just finish the interview in a hallway somewhere. So it was like the most wrestling type interview ever. I'm just like, oh no, this thing's happening. Let's go and let's just finish this elsewhere. So it was absolutely fun and super exciting. And I'm really happy I got to be a part of it. I think I even cried when Will interviewed me, so that was fun.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, because I had to interview you for this because I was going to interview you. And so yeah, it was quite a project. And I will say that the people I didn't have to lie to were like the easiest ones because like getting to interview like Chris Harrington, who like would obviously know about this, and getting to talk to him in kind of in a full open dialogue about it, and he knows this is a book because it's like
for the record, Chris Harrington is the vice president of business affairs for AEW, and he was the first AEW employee, I believe.
Yeah,
was he number one? Yeah.
And so so that was a really important one to have because he was there from the ground up.
Quite literally at the beginning.
Yes, he was there at the foundational level.
So he was there before the first All In. There's this. I mean, I want to be very coy about what's in the book. We have several months to promote it, so I don't want to give away what's in the book. I want people
no spoilers.
To then have a dialogue, but there's a narrative that I think almost everyone believes that Tony Khan was sitting at the first All In, and he suddenly a light bulb went off in his head. He had the concept for AEW since he was a child.
Right.
And by the time the first All In took place, like Chris Harrington was already like on the payroll. There wasn't even a name for the company yet. So I found that so intriguing. And also, it's great when myths are dispelled. It's a great myth, but it truly would be a miracle if the AEW came to pass in such a brief amount of time.
Yeah, I can't wait for people to read this book and really when a lot of these stories start to become kind of folklore, because that's the way it always kind of happens with books. And thinking about the idea that this was in the works for the last couple of years, I remember thinking when we first had meetings about it, and I remember being told, yeah, this is going to be published in the middle of 2025. And I remember thinking, God, that's so long from now. And now we're here. And all of a sudden, this book is coming. And I guess I said this to say that, for you, you're not a stranger to this process. Like you understand how quickly that can all sneak up on you. That all of a sudden, everybody's putting their work in. Everything is coming together for the book, and then all of a sudden, we do have. Because there was no panic in you. I never got a sense from you that, that 2025 is a very long time off. I think.
No, but I did know I had to have it finished by a certain.
Right. And
I knew that the writing had to be done, and things kept occurring. Like it's about the first 5 years, but there was still these like big moments in AEW. And so it's like, oh, well, I have to work this in somehow, or at least I have to reference it somewhere. And then there was a certain point where I'm like, now I'm drawing a line. Whatever happens from tomorrow on is not in the book. I have to tie the book up, deliver it to the editor. It has to be edited. People from AEW need to look at it. They need to tweak it. They need to correct it. We have to focus on all these great photos that, realize it's a coffee table book. So there are hundreds of spectacular photos. And the book is told not only in words, and I feel I did a masterful job like I always do, but it's told in this beautiful photography. And some of those photographs are things you'd never find on a wrestling website, that you'd never see anywhere else, because there are these candid moments behind the scenes. And that's another insight. They go hand in hand, the words and the imagery. There's stuff you guys saw with your eyes. This is the first time the fans will ever see something like this.
Oh man, I'm excited. Like we haven't seen the manuscript at all. So like it's weird having been involved with it like 2 years ago, and now all of a sudden it's going to be a reality, but it's like a first time experience for the both of us. So I'm super stoked. I'm curious, without giving any spoilers, because we obviously don't want to spoil it for our fans. Keith, is there anything like that you can share from like a behind the scenes story or a moment from your research or an interview that did not make it into the book?
No, there were a lot of things that made it into the book. I remember, I'm not going to mention what the moment is, but there was a moment where I was backstage, and I saw Sting at meeting with some of the other wrestlers. And, I've been around the business for a while, so I'm like, well, my philosophy is if something's not told to me on the record, I don't write about it. If somebody says, okay, I want this in public, then I will write about it. So I was chatting with Sting, and I said, of course, I'm not going to put this in the book, but, this seemed to be a very poignant moment. And he goes, oh, no, I want that in the book. I want you.
That sounds just like Sting.
Yeah, it does.
And, just to be part of that and to it's like you saw this with your eyes. Wow, I didn't know anyone noticed that was going on. That's very special to me. Please include it. And it's a behind the scenes moment that a fan would not maybe expect to be in an AEW book, but it's there. I mean, it's laid out for the whole world to see. It's a positive moment, but it's still a moment that no one would ever consider.
No, that again, just knowing that, somebody like Sting, and most of these guys, I think there's so much of what has gone on in AEW and gone on in so many people's careers that they would want to have told. And because, again, AEW isn't just a story of, like you said, light bulb moment and it just happened. There's so many different elements that created the story. And so I kind of want to switch gears and talk about your writing as a whole and how you've kind of gotten to do this before. AEW's book isn't your first go around with this, as we've talked about. How did you feel this experience compared to some of your other writing experiences and putting books together?
I mean, look, I generally feel very satisfied after the fact with the experience. Although, of course, you can always read through something you wrote and find flaws, just like if you talk to any wrestler, they see something in their match, even a perfect match, which in my eyes is a perfect match, and they'll see a flaw there. So that I've grown to accept that, doing this for so long. But I did feel very embraced by the AEW community. And I felt that people let down their guard around me very quickly. Now, I think some of that had to do with the fact that, some of the wrestlers knew me from before, like guys like Chris Jericho knew me from before. Guys like Adam Copeland knew me from before. But I also think, like working with you, Will, people would see me talking to you. People would see me talking to Chris Harrington, and they're like, well, I guess he must be an okay guy because they're talking to him and no one's throwing him out of the back. But I did feel
I actually remember that happening with security, who was concerned. They were like, why, what is happening here? And then it was like, oh no, exactly. He must be okay.
And I'm accustomed to that. I'm accustomed to that. And, but I felt that the people in AEW, who knew about the book, it was very special to them. And the guys and the women in AEW, I think because it was something new and fresh and everybody was trying to prove something and create something unprecedented, I was kind of swept up in that energy for a while. So I'm still feeling that positivity.
And I feel like it's going to kind of keep doing this roller coaster all the way up until November when this book actually comes out. I'm super, super stoked. We're having an awesome conversation with Keith Greenberg here on AEW Unrestricted. We got to take another quick break, but coming back, we've got more to talk about this awesome book right here on this podcast.
AEW Unrestricted. It's Aubrey and Will, and we are talking with our guest, Keith Elliot Greenberg. He is the author of this book, is All Elite, the inside story of All Elite Wrestling, which is going to be available in stores November. Keith, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the people you've gotten to speak to, because, of course, AEW Unrestricted, as everybody knows, is sponsored by our good friends at Upper Deck, and we have got our 2025 Upper Deck collection, and we pulled some cards from some of the people that you got to talk to, or that we got to talk to, and I wanted your kind of short response on your thoughts on some of the people that we got to hear from in this book. Like, for example, this man I just drew 3 cards from, but he is the Nueve, he is Le Champion, he is Chris Jericho.
Chris Jericho, I would say that he is a man for the ages. Yes. You can look at Lionheart Chris Jericho, or you can look at Chris Jericho today. I mean, he reminds me in some ways of Terry Funk. There was young collegiate Terry Funk back in Amarillo, and there was Chainsaw Charlie, crazy old man Terry Funk. But he was able to reinvent himself and make himself more fascinating with each era.
Love
awesome. I've got one here for current AEW champion Jon Moxley.
Jon Moxley, as intense as he is, as unpredictable as he is, as violent as he is on screen, I feel that in some ways he is a man who found himself in AEW. A man who found peace in AEW, a man who I believe AEW is very much in his DNA at this point.
Yeah, I can't think of AEW without thinking of Moxley.
Yeah, exactly. We have, and actually, I pulled a couple of premium cards. We have Hikaru Shida.
Hikaru Shida, who I believe you interviewed, Will, and I recall seeing you guys just chatting, and you seem to have a very good rapport. What I admire about Hikaru Shida is that she embraced AEW to the point that at one stage, rather than going back to Japan, she stayed here to help build the company. And that is the type of dedication that has contributed to AEW's success. And it's that kind of spirit that is the soul of this book.
Oh, speaking of heart and soul of AEW, I pulled a Darby Allin card. What can you say about Darby?
Allin, there are a few like Darby Allin. Maybe Darby Allin is a 1 in a million type of human being. He's another person who I feel truly found a home in AEW. He's somebody who may not have fit in any place, but over here, he was welcomed. And of course, we saw a different side of Darby Allin, where, when he teamed up with Sting, it was not just a storyline. They truly became family. And that's very touching.
And, well, speaking of heart and soul of AEW, we have to talk about the executive vice presidents. We got Matthew and Nicholas Jackson, the Young Bucks.
Well, I remember when I wrote my book on indie wrestling back in 2020, I was at a signing and one fan said, "I'm not buying this book if the Young Bucks are in it." even as baby faces, they could generate that type of hate. Well, if you want to hate them, now they're giving you plenty of reason to. One thing about the Young Bucks, they give the people what they want.
Oh my God. They're like, you can't think indie wrestling without thinking of the Young Bucks and how they just transformed wrestling enough that they became a part of the Challenger brand.
Right? And look, then of course, the Challenger brand, and very much they've transferred that indie spirit to AEW.
Hell yeah. All right. I've got one who is frequently referred to as the main character of AEW, Mr. Hangman Adam Page.
Well, Adam Page, he was always a great wrestler. I remember seeing Adam Page at Ring of Honor, the pre-Tony Khan era Ring of Honor, and just thinking, man, this guy is incredible. But he didn't have the stature of some of the others who jumped ship here, but he sure does now. And, he is really someone who built himself in AEW, and AEW built him.
I love it. Honestly, like that. And there's so many more people that you're going to get to hear from in the book. We just got scratched the surface with some of those names. And, talking about getting to do biographical work, that's something that, was your expertise. That's something that you've been doing a very, very long time. And just looking at some of the works you've gotten to do, and like looking at The Day John Lennon Died, December 8th, 1980, book you published in 2010. What was that experience like getting to put that together?
Well, I mean, even though this isn't wrestling related, although there is a wrestling section in there, because the night that John Lennon was killed, there was a card at Madison Square Garden, and I actually interviewed Rick Martel, and the wrestlers were in the bar, and the news came on in New York. They were in New York, and I think he went over to one of the Wild Samoans who he had wrestled that night, and they broke character and were watching the TV and talking about the assassination of John Lennon. So that will give you a sense of what that book is like. I'm a New Yorker, as you may be able to tell. It's told from very much a New Yorker perspective. At one point, I interviewed the person who was the mayor of New York at the time, Mayor Ed Koch, and he said just that morning he was like listening to the Beatles in his car, and he said, I always thought Paul McCartney was better than John Lennon. And then when John Lennon was shot later that night, there was like a moment of guilt, and he was thinking like, did I cause that? And in some ways, that type of getting people to open up when you interview them, that tone has continued with me my entire career. So this AEW book suits that perfectly.
So you've obviously talked to many, many wrestling legends. Who was sort of the most surprising interview that you've ever had, and why?
Well, I mean, that's hard to say, because I consider, people always say, oh, who was your best interview, your most interesting interview? Like you guys, I don't consider an interview with a wrestler to be a one-time thing. I consider it part of a relationship. So it's almost like saying, what's the best conversation you ever had with your girlfriend or, with your husband? It goes on forever. It's part of a continuum. So, the people who I interviewed for this book are people I still intend to be speaking with, because it's not like my relationship with AEW is going to go away unless I did something egregious that I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that'll be the case. I think when it comes time to write the second stage of AEW, the first 10 years, I think.
And I'll still be around, and I'll still be writing.
Yeah, I love it. And I love that we were able to even bring the John Lennon story back around to professional wrestling, because at the end of the day, everything is pro wrestling.
Everything goes back to wrestling. And you know what? Sometimes I meet people who were never wrestling fans, and I actually feel pity for them.
Yes.
Like you're missing this whole life philosophy, this whole way of viewing the world. And, I think that is another thing that people in AEW share. They understand that and with a sense of seriousness and a sense of humor.
Yeah, it's just like, do you like rock concerts? Do you like storytelling? Do you like heroes overcoming battles that they've fought for, who knows how long? Do you like crowd interactions? There's so many things that are great about wrestling. And I'm just so looking forward to this book because the spirit of AEW is alive and well. And just seeing the amount of like growth we've had over all this time, it's going to be so fun to look back and read about sort of like the start of this behemoth that has literally changed pro wrestling. And I can't thank you enough for being a part of it and for being a part of this interview today.
Thank you. And, I also feel that this is a story of you guys. It's the story of the talent. And, it's all of our stories. We're fans. It's our story. We all experienced it together. And in some ways, we all went through it together. I think Nyla Rose says in the book, like, the fans throw the vibes out to us. We take those vibes in and we throw it back to them. And, I think that's what this book is going to achieve.
Hell yeah, it is. Thank you, Keith Greenberg, for joining us today. If you don't already follow Keith, you can follow him on Twitter and Instagram, Keith E. Greenberg, and definitely pre-order. This book is All Elite, the inside story of All Elite Wrestling today. It'll be out in hardcover and ebook format this November. That's literally months away. You can follow this podcast. Just check out all our video episodes on YouTube. We have new audio episodes come out every Thursday, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. And just remember that AEW Unrestricted is sponsored in part by Upper Deck. You can collect your favorite wrestlers in the 2025 Upper Deck AEW and start your trading card collection today. Unwrap autograph, memorabilia, or premium tech inserts. Visit upperdeck.com to learn more. And if you're not already an AEW insider, you can get early access to ticket pre-sales, special merchandise offers, and more straight to your inbox. Sign up today, AEWTix.com. Dynamite is on TBS Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. and streaming on Max. AEW Collision is live every Saturday on TNT. ROH streams every Thursday on Honor Club. I'm Aubrey Edwards with Will Washington and our guest, Keith Greenberg. Thank you so much for listening to AEW Unrestricted. Peace out, everybody.